The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para-X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only. I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
And tonight we're asking you,
what are you afraid of? Philadelphia's horror home with hosts T. Fox Dunham and Phil Thomas.
What are you afraid of? We're back. And for those of you listening now, we are moving into summer. Thank the gods, it's summer. Now I'm recording this back in late April. In fact, it's April 15th, and we are still under a quarantine essentially, and hopefully it's lifted by the time this episode airs. This is episode 142, calling it Haunted Water, and we have a special guest, author Leslie Lutz. So great to speak to her, and I hope you're all surviving out there. I don't know what the future's going to be like, but we're all hopefully getting back into the swing of things, and I know my wife and I are so looking forward to leaving the house and exploring the area of Lancaster and getting down to Meriden and going up to the Hudson Valley and all the wonderful weekend things that we do in the summer. Just after what this spring and winter has been like, we're going to explode. But we're back on What Are You Afraid of? This is T. Fox Dunham with ghost stories, fiction stories, interviews, music, and lots of witty banter. And we're on Para-X Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. And check out our website for a complete everything, I mean everything, plus a lot of written material not a part of the audio show at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. So this is one of our author episodes, and we like to alternate with ghost stories, paranormal investigators, some mysteries, some crime noir stuff. You know, we're a dark audio magazine, that's what we do. And we are back featuring one of the authors coming out. In fact, her book is coming out on May 5th. Her name is Leslie Karen Lutz. She's a devoted... Hi, how are you doing?
Great, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, you know, just surviving like everyone else, I guess. So let me tell you a little bit about Leslie. She's a devoted fan of scuba diving and creature horror. Her writing has appeared in various journals, including Catterskill Basin Literary Journal, Typishly, Number One, The Lyric, and Raintown Review. She has been a speaker at the DFW Writers Convention and is an active member of the DFW Writers Workshop. She draws on her volunteer experiences, including her time teaching GED courses at the Atlantic Women's Prison, where orange is the new black, to tell stories that challenge stereotypes about forgotten people. I like that a lot, about telling stories about forgotten people, the disenfranchised. You can find her website at lesliekarenlutz.com. We'll have a link for that up at our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, where you can find more information about Leslie and links to her book. Her new book, Fractured Tide, is coming out from Blink, which is a young adult arm of Harper-Collins. That's incredible. It'll be out May 5th. The show will probably air a little after, but please check out the book. Go over to the website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. Find the Amazon link. Go download it. I love the themes, and they're perfect for summer. So, you're doing well, Leslie. You're surviving the plague.
I am surviving inside, but it's definitely been a different kind of book debut experience to do this during the COVID-19 crisis.
Right, right. In fact, I am doing a charity anthology for Gutter Books. It's my first editing job. I just always like to write it, and I've edited before. But when they came to me and said if I wanted to do a charity anthology for blood cancer survivors, for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I said, okay, we were going to release in June, but everything has just gone so crazy with book releases, we decided to push the whole thing back until August or September. So I guess you're having to change your schedule a lot.
Yeah, and I've been hearing about other authors who pushed their release off for 9 months, something like that. But this was pretty. The release is happening so close to the beginning of the COVID crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was really a lot of time to shift gears. And so yeah, it's coming out May 5th, and there have been a lot of changes. I was going to be going to some conferences. I was going to New York to go to Thriller Fest,
mm-hmm.
which just got canceled a few days ago.
Yeah.
So everything's shifting to online, which is, I think there are a lot of great opportunities to talk to people online about your book and to connect with readers. So I'm trying to stay optimistic, but it's definitely a different experience for a debut author who is expecting a bookstore launch and that kind of thing.
You'll get all that. Don't worry about it. It's, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the initial release date, but really selling your book is a marathon. It's a constant job. And so it's like,
that's a good point.
It really is. And it's just there are a lot of books that have a week release dates and week releases, and the authors keep plugging and they keep plugging and they keep building an audience, and eventually it just explodes. So it really, especially with online marketing, which is a way a lot of authors are going now who don't have access to agents or promotional agents or the kind of funding you need for budgeting these kind of events. Online promotion is definitely the way things are turning now, and I think the virus is definitely going to take us more in that direction. So,
for sure, yeah.
This is T. Fox Dunham. What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We are talking to author Leslie Lutz on episode 142, Haunted Water, and we will start our interview. So, on your website, and I love this, you say, and I'm going to do this in a rather creepy voice.
That's great.
If it's got a tentacle, or a water ghost, or a near drowning, I'm probably going to write about it. So, I love how you merge your fascination with water in your stories, but where does this fascination come from?
I'm actually not entirely sure where exactly, but I didn't do it intentionally. I just noticed it after I kept writing stories that were around some kind of body of water, and there was a threat coming from the body of water. And I suppose it might come from childhood. We moved when I was 7 from England to Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge shock. But so we went from cosmopolitan and all this, and then suddenly we're in the backwoods of Mississippi on a lake. And the lake was a source of fascination for me, adventure, but it was also dangerous because it was full of water moccasins. Mm-hmm. So I think from a young age, these bodies of water were impressed on me as both exciting and frightening. And then it just ended up in my stories that way. That's my best guess.
Mm-hmm. The wonderful thing about water is that it is a mirror. It is a looking glass. And when you cast something into it or look into it, you don't know what's looking back at you. I'm an angler. I love fishing. I've been fishing since I was a kid. And one of the best parts of fishing is that you can't see what you're angling for. You know, you can't see what's coming, and you never know the surprises about what's going to grab that line. And so I can imagine you never know the monsters that are waiting for you under the water in the depths. And of course, it's a wonderful mirror into the subconscious too. You know, we start going Joseph Campbell and Union. Yeah. This is T. Fox Dunham. What Are You Afraid of? We are talking to Leslie Lutz on episode 142. Now, You did me the honor of finding a ghost story in Texas and writing it up for us, which was very kind of you. We appreciate that.
I was happy to do it. It was fun.
It gives us a nice, full content for the episode. We try to put a true or folklore ghost story on every episode, and of course our wonderful voice actors read them. Now, you wrote us one, which I titled The Most Haunted Hotel in Texas. And this is a ghost story that Leslie did for episode 142 for us, read by our English folk singer narrator, our beloved David Walton. We'll be right back with Leslie Lutz on episode 142, Haunted Water. And again, check out our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, and we're on ParaX Radio, Friday nights at 9 p.m.
The Most Haunted Hotel in Texas. Researched and written by Leslie Lutz, author of A Fractured Tide. Read by David Walton. If I get in my car and drive west from my house in Fort Worth, in less than an hour, I can be at the curbside of the most haunted hotel in Texas, the famous Baker Hotel. Towering, beautiful, broken. I've never been inside. It's been boarded up for almost 50 years, but I've often sat at a nearby cafe to stare at the dark windows and wonder what it would be like to spend the night. In the videos I've seen of the interior, the hotel's former magnificence has been replaced by doors hanging off hinges, bare concrete, broken glass, and graffiti. But in its heyday of the 1930s and 40s, the hotel hosted celebrities like Judy Garland, Clark Gable, and Marlene Dietrich. Really anyone who was well-heeled and wanted to drink the healing, crazy waters that put the town on the map in the first place. Even Bonnie and Clyde stayed several nights at the Baker during their infamous crime spree. Despite its notoriety as a spa for the sick and a stylish refuge for the wealthy, the hotel went bankrupt, changed hands, fell on hard times again, and was finally shuttered in 1972, but not without leaving a few guests as permanent residents. The original owner of the hotel, T.B. Baker, is said to haunt the 11th floor, where he lived with his family. Near the door to his once lavish suite, the smell of cigar smoke often comes out of nowhere, and many who've stepped inside the room later find small objects missing from their pockets. Baker's mistress haunts the 7th floor, and although there are many variations of the story, most believe she threw herself out of her window, falling to her death beside the Olympic-sized swimming pool. The few ghost hunters and locals who are allowed in the Baker say they've caught glimpses of a figure with red hair on the east side of the 7th floor, along with the scent of her lavender perfume. The Baker is also home to the ghost of a young boy, a cancer patient who came to the hotel in the 1930s to drink the healing waters, but sadly died in the hotel. Then there's the ghost of a young bellhop who died in the 1950s after being horrifically cut in half during an elevator accident. I've heard stories of people inside the hotel getting too close to the yawning opening of the elevator shaft and feeling a force pushing them towards the edge. In other local lore, the ghosts of Bonnie and Clyde hunt the Brazos room and the ballroom. Keep in mind though, the infamous duo also haunt the woods in Louisiana where they were killed by authorities, and the stolen car where they finally met their bullet-ridden end. While no one can agree on the final resting place of Bonnie and Clyde, some argue that their spirits chose to come back to the Baker, as it was a place of fond memories, rather than the place of their death. I like to think, as I watch the gradual transformation of the grand old lady, as the locals call it, that the mediums are right, The ghosts who stay there do so not because they're tortured, but because they love it. The entire town of Mineral Wells is buzzing about the $65 million renovation that will have the hotel opening its doors again in 2022. I know when the guest register finally has a fresh page to write on, I'll be renting the most haunted room on opening night, just to see what happens.
What are you afraid of?
Hi, I'm Tim Wagner, Bram Stoker award-winning author.
Hashtag Grave Girls.
This is Katrina Weidman of Destination America's Paranormal Lockdown.
This is Jim Chambers. I'm the author of The Engines of Sacrifice.
This is Jasper Barr, award-winning author of The Final Cut.
And you're listening to What Are You Afraid Of?
What Are You Afraid Of?
To What Are You Afraid Of?
What are you afraid of?
Love it. Fantoxic, please. Fantoxic.
Sweet Amityville, Phil. These are trying times for the supernatural and paranormal. So many TV shows and podcasts. In time like these, we need more horror hosts like Shauna and Vicky on Geeks Paranormal on Parax Radio on Wednesday nights.
Gosh, Fox, you are so right. I love those geeks. Shauna and Vicky. Does geek stand for something?
You know it, my creepy companion. Geek stands for General Ectoplasm Exposition Knowledge Society.
Wow. Do they speak to inspirational ghosts and give information on hauntings around the world?
Do demons vomit pea soup? That's Vicky and Shauna. They are the go-to ladies of the paranormal. I'd trust them to investigate anything.
Oh, I know. Why, if we were abducted by UFOs and taken into space for probing, I'd want Sean and Vicky to save us from some X-Files action.
Some extraordinary X-Files action. And if Bigfoot abducted us, stole us away to some remote Yeti cave, and forced us into making venison and pine needles ectoplasm pie with a dash of banshee wailing, I'd want Sean and Vicky to give us the recipe for some good old ectoplasm pie.
Now, that would be some peppery paranormal pie.
Yum.
And if we were possessed by a horde of hell demons, guess who had one exorcising the spirits?
Sean and Vicky, am I right?
Damn skippy, foxy lad.
Listen to those wonderful hosts of the paranormal on Parax Radio at 9 p.m. on Parax Radio, exploring the paranormal with the geeks.
We're Phil and Fox on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show on Parax Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m.
Your source for everything paranormal. Para-X.
We're back. Episode 142. Haunted Water. This is T. Fox Dunham. We are back with author Leslie Lutz, and it's so great having you here. In fact, we were talking about conventions she was going to. She was going up to ThrillerCon in New York, and of course that got canceled. We were going to be at at Phenomenon in Lancaster. You know, it's like one of the big paranormal Philadelphia ones, and that was canceled in March, and I kind of saw that one coming. And now here's the thing. I get down to World Horror Con. I know you are too. I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association. I've been for years, and sometimes I go to the con, sometimes I don't. Often a publisher will invite me down to help run their table, and I'll get invited to do readings or sit on some panel somewhere. But it is also a great expense and a great time sink too. So you sort of have to pick your conventions well. And there are conventions where you reach out to other readers, and then there are conventions where it's just you and other authors. You know, and so you sort of have to pick those two. But the World Horror Con was going to be in London this year, and a lot of people were going to make that trip. The 1 year they were going to go, they were all going to go to London, and I was sad because I couldn't go. I really wanted to go back, but who can afford airfare anymore? And then, of course, it was canceled because of this terrible epidemic we're in. So a lot of us are having to adjust. But we are back. What Are You Afraid Of? Episode 142. You can find us on Parax Radio and on most major podcast services. We're always expanding. And that was a wonderful ghost story read by David Walton. So your book, Fractured Tide, out from Blink, is out on May 5th. Find that at Amazon.com. You can definitely check it out. Get the digital version, especially if we're still languishing in this sort of plague malaise. You talked about monster building. What is monster building, and how does one build a good monster?
I spend a lot of time looking at different kinds of monsters to see what elements of a monster really freak somebody out the most. And it was a strange thing how this monster came to be. I was scuba diving, and I was sometimes you have to hang on the descent line at about 15 feet to decompress a little bit before you go up all the way. And we were hanging out at the line, and these jellyfish came by. And so, we have gloves on. We're just touching the jellyfish very gently. Wouldn't hurt them. And they're reacting in these amazing ways. And I was talking to my husband later about it once I was out of the water and about how cool the experience was of seeing these jellyfish. And I looked up and he looked rather horrified. And I said, "What? What is it?" And he says, "Oh, it's just jellyfish. Ugh, it just creeped me out." And I realized that this creature that I find kind of fascinating is a little bit creepy for a lot of people because it's this gelatinous, consuming, mindless thing. So I took some of the elements of a jellyfish and included that in my monster. I don't want to give too much away because it's a bit of a reveal, but that's part of where the monster came from, was just thinking about what is something that freaks my husband out. Yeah, this thing would totally do it. But I also think the idea of those sinuous tentacles are just, we have a sort of a gut reaction with recoiling from that kind of movement and shape, whether it be a snake or a tentacle. Just as humans, we know this is not good. We need to step away from it. So that's one of the reasons why I think so many great monsters do have some kind of tentacle component.
Well, thank you for that. That's quite clarifying, and I appreciate the fact that it's your monsters are based on what scares your husband.
It was fun.
So, what is your writing process like? Like, you get an idea, you get the inspiration, your husband sees a two-headed cat, and all of a sudden you're off to write about the aquatic two-headed cat. So that's the idea. What is your process like from that initial spark of monstrous tentacled inspiration to the final product?
It's not a very neat process at all. I often will start something thinking I want to go in this particular direction. I don't outline. I've tried. I think it would be great if I could outline. But when I've done that, I come up with a pretty bad result. So I just stop doing that. So generally, I'll start with an idea or an image, something that I just can't get out of my head. Like in the case of Fractured Tide, I was thinking about diving on a ship and the way that the ship just materializes out of the deep in a very ghostly way. It's quite beautiful, but frightening, which I think good horror, I like it when horror is both beautiful and frightening at the same time. So I start with the image and then I start writing from there. And in this case, I wrote 100 pages of something. I had one idea in my head. I got to 100 and I just did not like it. It was terrible. So I threw it away, went back to the drawing board, wrote another 40 pages in a brand new direction, stalled out, threw it away, started again. So I like to improve my process because it's not efficient and I'd like to be able to write a little quicker. I have friends who can churn out a book every 9 months. And I don't know how they do it. But once I hit the right point in the story, I have to know where the story starts. At what point is that first paragraph starting? And sometimes I have a tendency to start too early, and then I have to cut material. So once I know where the story starts and I have the right image and tone, like the right voice, then I can really draft well in a way that's going to produce something that can actually stick.
Never lose that. Never lose that pain. Never lose that frustration. You were talking about, writers who can churn out books every 9 months. I know a lot of those kind of authors too, and there is a danger in not challenging yourself, in getting too comfortable with your process, in just being able to, zap this out, another pizza, another pie out of the oven, and it ends up often being the same pie over and over again. And
that's a good point.
It's like the first 10 books sold 50 copies on Amazon. So why write an 11th the same way? Get out there, challenge yourself. In fact, that's one of the questions I have for you. And of course, a lot of our listeners are horror fans and noir fans, artists, authors, filmmakers. So we try to get people on who are successful to tell their story and to give advice. And that's part of something we do here at What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show. So now reading about your history, you built up your confidence, and it sounds like it was a painful, excruciating process. And you built up your confidence, and you pitched your novel to an agent. Now, how did you get there, and why did you go to an agent first? Why not submit directly to a publisher?
This was my fourth manuscript, and I had been trying to get published for about 15 years. And the first one just should stay in the desk drawer forever. It's a terrible novel. I don't know why I thought it was good at the time, and I'm glad it's in the desk drawer. Mm-hmm. Then manuscripts 2 and 3, I actually did query agents there. And with the third one, I started looking at small or medium-sized publishers that don't require an agent. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things I wanted to do was get that door opened for me for more publishing opportunities. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the agent came in. There's the writers conference, the one that got canceled in June, that I'm very grief-stricken about. DFW Con is that I went there 3 years in a row. And the third year, there's an opportunity to pitch to agents there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I did it all 3 years. And finally, with this fourth project, I found the right agent, and she was interested in it. So, and I know there are some downsides to picking an agent, because obviously they take a bite of the pie. Mm-hmm. But for me, they reduce the stress of trying to figure out where is this going to go, and how am I going to get an audience? What kinds of things do I need to think about when I'm signing a contract? Mm-hmm. So she's Amy Bishop of Distel, Goderich, and Barrett. She's fantastic. And one of the things she also does is she still works with me, even though the book is sold. She comes in and she helps me figure out if there's a marketing issue that I might need a little help with. Mm-hmm. She'll talk to the publisher about it, because she knows all the ins and outs of the way a book rollout works. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons why I really like working with an agent. It's been fantastic. And I think working on your own is great for people who might feel a little bit more, I don't know, I guess confident is the right word, that it takes, especially if you're going to self-publish. Mm-hmm. You self-publish, which is a wonderful route for a lot of people. I have a friend who does it beautifully. If you're going to self-publish, though, or go with a small publisher, you have to have an immense amount of confidence mm-hmm. to put yourself out there and to market your book. And if you don't really feel that yet, it can be pretty anxiety-producing. So it's nice to have the support of a bigger machinery, I guess is what I'm saying.
So you can focus on the writing. So many authors go out, they publish their first book with a smaller or medium-sized indie publisher, and it hits Amazon.com, and you get printed copies in your room, and then all of a sudden it's like, what do you do mm-hmm. now? Where do you go now? And unfortunately, there is an expectation for a lot of new authors that once their book is published, they'll be the next Stephen King, and it's just not like that at all.
Right. And a lot of people will, I think, doing something like with a small publisher, there are a lot of benefits. For example, you can reach someone all the time. And I've heard some stories of people with bigger publishers that can't reach anybody on the team. I'm lucky my imprint, Blink, which is a part of Harper-Collins, is actually a smaller imprint. And I have no problem reaching people, and they've been wonderful. But I know that not everybody with big five publishing has that experience. And with a small publisher, you do get a chance to have a more personal relationship sometimes with the people who are publishing your book. But then again, once the book is out, it can be really tough to find the audience. And that's got to be a crushing disappointment once you put all that work into it. And then, you put it out there and nobody's listening. So it's a rough road that requires a lot of resilience and confidence if you're going to go small or indie or self-pub.
The most important trait for any author is faith.
Yeah.
But your book is Fractured Tide. We have an excerpt also read by our wonderful David Walton. Let me read the description of the book. Sia practically grew up in water scuba diving, and wreck dives are run-of-the-mill. Take the Taurus out, explore the reef, uncover the secrets locked in the sunken craft, but this time the dive goes terribly wrong. Attacked by a mysterious creature, Sia's boat is sunk, her customers are killed, and she washes up on a deserted island with no sign of rescue in sight. Waiting in the water is a seemingly unstoppable monster that is still hungry. In the jungle just off the beach are dangers best left untested. When Sia reunites with a handful of survivors, she sees it as the first sign of light. Sia's wrong. Between the gulf of deadly seawater in front of her and suffocating depth of the jungle behind her, even the island isn't what it seems. Haunted by her own mistakes and an inescapable dread, Sia's best hope for finding answers may rest in the center of the island, at the bottom of a flooded sinkhole that only she has the skills to navigate. But even if the creature lurking in the depths doesn't swallow her and the other survivors, the secrets of their fractured reality on the island might. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, so we have an excerpt from your book, read by David Walton. We will be right back on episode 142, Haunted Water, with author Leslie Lutz, on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show on Parax Radio, Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and find us on all major podcast services. Well, just about all of them. Check our website out at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com for a page about Leslie. Find links to her book, including Fractured Tide, plus, information about our other authors, plus interviews, and a lot of material on the website and our archive of ghost stories, all with narrated elements from our past. Good God, 142 shows at this point. Anyway, this is an excerpt from your book, Fractured Tide, read by David Walton. This is T. Fox Dunham. We'll be right back.
An excerpt from Fractured Tide, a novel written by Leslie Lutz, due to be released in early May by Blink, Harper-Collins. Read by David Walton. 3 years ago, right before your big exit, you talked me into that midnight dive on the reef. It'll be like floating in space, Peanut, but with our lights, we'll become the stars. Maybe it's why I love diving in the dark, or the near dark, the sun slowly staining the waters red. Every time I descend into the black water, with my body hanging over hundreds of feet of nothing, like a girl drifting on the dark side of the moon, you're there with me. I took a giant stride off the platform. The world shifted, became a rush of bubbles. The cold slipped into my wetsuit and soaked my rash guard and bikini. I made the OK sign. Mum waved from the roof deck. Her skin glowed rosy in the dawn light, her shoulders back and proud, her gaze set west towards land. It's one of my last, best memories of her. I swam for the white buoy that marked the descent line. The surface of the ocean slapped the side of my head, rippled over my faceplate. And when the sense of unease hit me, the one I'd had the day before in the USS Andrews, I brushed it away. Mum was right, I thought. I'd seen nothing but a dream in that ship, a floating, horrific dream that leapt out of my unconscious like a slippery fish. Narked, imagining things. I reached the buoy, purged my BC. The air burbled out of the valves and I sank. Immediate relief. Nobody tells you how boring it is being stranded. Above my head, the early morning light skimmed the surface of the waves. Beneath my fins, the world inked out. I pointed my dive light down, past my feet into the blackness and sank slowly, like floating in space. 15 feet down on the ship line, the safety stop gear came into view, a bright pink tank, the regulator out of its bungee and hanging loose, pulled sideways by the current. I slipped off my gloves and tucked them into a pocket on my BC. If I could have, I would have lip-synced to the Vanessa Peters song playing in my head. That's how much I wasn't thinking about what swam just outside my circle of light. Untying the knot was awkward while holding the dive light in one hand and kicking against the drag of the current. The light kept falling from my fingers, dangling from my wrist, sweeping the depths like a crazy searchlight. I finally took out my rag, held my breath, and stuck the end of my light into my mouth. I've been practicing since you went away, and I can hold my breath for almost 2 minutes, a few seconds shy of my grandmother's record. As soon as I pulled the last of the knot free, I should have been satisfied, headed to the surface. Instead, I froze, hanging on the rope like a barnacle, a prickle on my neck, a brush of current, a sixth sense just outside the poor reach of my dive light. Something was watching me.
And that was Sea Monster by the Crypts.
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head, the sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet milk. So salty and so good. You won't miss it. And we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of a novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
Illuminating the paranormal. Opening your mind to the possibility. We'll talk about all things metaphysical, paranormal, and everything in between. Illuminating the Paranormal, Tuesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Para X.
We're back. Episode 142, Haunted Water. This is T. Fox Dunham, and that was a wonderful reading done by our beloved David Walton. We couldn't do the show without him. He's got such a fan club too, of people who just adore his reading, and he's come with us on this journey. And I know I just sent him a packet of like 15 stories as we get ready to do our summer and moving into our insane Halloween October season. But it is summer finally, and we're so grateful it's here. And even if the plague is still going on, get out into the world. Stand 5-6 feet away from people, but get out to the parks, get out to the water, feel the sun on your face, and then come home and listen to a show about darkness, spookiness, ghosts, and sea monsters.
Yeah, we actually went out today, my daughter and I, just to get some sunshine, and it's gorgeous out here in Fort Worth. It's like 70 degrees and sunny. Went to the lake. So yeah, it's so important to just get out and get some fresh air. Get
some vitamin D, get some energy back, and hopefully we'll be able to do that much more as this terrible epidemic hopefully starts to alleviate a bit and we can start moving forward. So we're back. We're talking to Leslie Lutz about her book, Fractured Tide, and her other work. So what is the element in your writing you would like to most improve, and how are you going to improve it?
That's a great question. Dialogue, and any scenes that are very heavily in dialogue. The scenes that are heavy in dialogue in Fractured Tide, they're great. They're fine now, but it took so many revisions to finally get those where they needed to be. And I think that the area of writing that's a little easier for me is writing about Sia being underwater. Those scenes when we're just surrounded by water and fish and coral, or when she's in the sinkhole, plummeting into the dark, that just came a little more easily. Of course, I had to revise it, but I didn't have to rip it up and start over many times. So I'd like to work more on dialogue in general. And I think I have some great writing books. And one of them is called The Scene Book by Sandra Schofield. And it's a great little thin, I think writing books, if you're going to have a writing book, it should be short and concise, to the point. And she has a lot of exercises in there about how to write a tight scene. But I'm going to be doing a lot of dialogue exercises. Some people suggest, every time I look this up, I notice people suggest sit in Starbucks and listen to people talk.
Oh.
Which, one, there are two problems with this right now. One, you can't go to Starbucks. I guess I could go sit in the drive-thru and talk to the barista. That's not going to work. So, but also, if you're sitting at Starbucks eavesdropping on someone's conversation, you could get caught doing that. And in real life dialogue, you can pick up the little ticks that you need to make dialogue sound right, sound real. But scenes of dialogue in a work of fiction only is a facsimile of real life. It's not real life, because real conversations, a lot of them are just not fit for the page. So trying to artfully change something into a tightly woven scene and still at the same time keep it sounding natural, that's harder for me than some of the other things I write. So that's what I'm going to be working on. And a lot of the writers at DFW Writers Workshop, where I spend every Wednesday night, was going there every Wednesday night. Now we're doing Zoom meetings, and we're still doing our critique sessions. And I think I'm going to be leaning on them pretty heavily, as I always have. Reading my scenes out loud. I'm reading one tonight for the new book. and trying to get a sense of whether or not it's working. And they're wonderful. They'll tell me if it's not working, and they'll tell me if my dialogue is stiff. And I have one friend who has told me that, like, God, this sounds like your teenager sounds like a 40-year-old soccer mom. You got to work on that. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I do. So I love that group because we laugh together but we also learn together. I don't know how people can write without some kind of writing community to lean on for their, to move up to the next level.
Right. That's the one that the two issues I actually have with dialogue is I end up making it sound like my own voice a little too much. So prose bleeds into dialogue, and all of a sudden you're writing just like your own prose. And the other issue is that I'm a stickler for grammar, but people don't speak in proper grammar. It's where you have to jump off, and it has to be quick cuts and fragments and things like that. So you just have to be very mindful of that. And a lot of that can be fixed in edits. But talk radio can be very good when they have callers who call in, and you can listen from people around the country. If you don't want to go sit in Starbucks, you can listen to talk radio. And
that's a good idea.
It really helps because you get that variety of different voices from around the country, who call in.
Oh, that is a great idea. I've never actually thought to do that. But yeah, you could get a lot of interesting colloquialisms just from listening to talk radio. Indeed. Especially down here in Fort Worth.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. This is a young adult book, Fractured Tide. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How is that different from writing for a general audience?
So young adult as a market, it's a kind of a strange the genre of writing in young adult. It straddles into adult as well, because I've heard the statistic somewhere that 70% of the people who are reading young adult are actually above the age of 18. So this book in particular is a crossover book. So it's 13 and up, but it could go 13 to 30, 13 to 55, depending upon your interests. So one of the things you have to do for a young adult audience, or even the older audience who is reading young adult, they're expecting a quicker pace. So they don't have patience for a lot of backstory. Mm-hmm. They generally want to jump into the story rather quickly. And there's something, the YA voice. So this is why so many YA books today are written in first person. It's easier to get voice in there in first person. Of course, there's the third person. You can do a lot with voice. But that's an expectation of agents, of the audience, of publishers, that the personality of your main character is it's just all over the page when it comes to the tone and the word choices. So I had to think a lot about that. I had to think about letting my character be more emotional, because distant characters don't do very well for young adult, in that, again, the audience has certain expectations about the read being a bit on the emotional side, whether that be fear or, angst or something. But it couldn't be a distant, dry narrator in general. It doesn't really work. So that's a couple of things. And then you have the issues of how appropriate it is for the audience. So I can have a dead guy walking around the island missing an eye, but I cannot have a sex scene. So there are certain things that you can and can't do. And even there's some YA that is becoming more and more adult, and you'll see there's some a little bit of sex in some young adult novels now. And sometimes pretty salty language. But you still have to think about, where is this going to end up in the library? Are there seventh graders who are going to be picking this up and reading it? Are they going to be turned off by something that's a little too adult? Or is your senior who picks it up like, oh, this is for babies? So you have to hit the right diction level. You have to challenge them without making them super uncomfortable.
Indeed. Thinking back to how it's changed, and I think back to shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and
I love that one.
And Angel. Angel's a favorite of mine. I love The Vampire with a Soul. I watch it every Halloween, like October, only in October, and I think that these are definitely stories that were supposedly written for older audiences, but they were targeted at the 12-year-old, the 13-year-old, and they definitely have their share of sex scenes and share of material that probably a lot of young adult publishers wouldn't do, and you can understand how the expectations and the maturity levels are beginning to shift as sort of television and pushes the limit.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So we are talking to Leslie Lutz, and she's providing some wonderful, wonderful insights, and I hope our authors listening out there are listening closely to this wise person we're speaking to. If you could go back to your journey when you started actively writing to be published, there's a difference between people who just enjoy writing and then professional authors who write to be published, and you could go back in time and say, hey, young Leslie, do this. This is what I've learned after all this struggle. Please start doing this now. What would it be?
I think the first thing I would tell myself to write what I really want to write, not what I think I should write. And I when I was in college taking creative writing courses, I think I was far too interested in impressing my professors. And they kind of you get this feeling sitting in class that you're supposed to just love literary fiction all the time and write it all the time because it's the best. Oh, there's nothing as good as literary fiction. And so I would try to write the kind of thing. I have done some literary short stories and I've even published them, but it's not what I love to do. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's one of my favorite shows. I love adventure fiction. If you ask me what I'm going to watch tonight, it might be Jaws. It's probably not going to be an art film. And so you have to be true to who you are and kind of own it. Like, this is who I am. You don't have to impress everybody. Just find your audience and talk to them. So that would be one thing. The other thing would be to get used to the idea of writing things and then throwing them away. I couldn't throw anything away in the beginning. And I remember I even had some professor who said, keep everything, have a file, put everything in your folder. And I think it makes it too precious if you keep everything. And then what happens, you sit down to write and you think, wow, I'm about to write something that I will keep forever. And it can create a little bit of a writer's block because it becomes too, like I said, too precious. But if you sit down and go, you know what, I'm going to write for 30 minutes. And if it's not any good, I'm just going to press the delete key. It's freedom to just write, and you can delete it. So I think those would be the two things. Write what you really want to write, not what you think other people want you to write, or what you think, what other people don't try to be impressing people. And the other one is writing every day, throw some of that away. You just don't need it all. It's fine. And then free yourself to try and experiment because you might not keep it.
When I was getting started, I was writing literary fiction. I loved Hemingway, I loved J.D. Salinger, and I loved Truman Capote. And that's what I was writing, these intense Hemingway-like stories. But then I realized if I wanted to build a career and actually get paid, I had to jump into some of the genres. I had to jump into sci-fi and jump into horror. And so I started doing that, and I'm billed as a horror author, but I really don't see myself that way. But it's just what's been most successful for me. But you want to eat.
Yeah. Well, and it's just the genre is really flexible for you can do so. I mean, you can slow down the pace and do a really cool character piece while you're scaring the heck out of people. I mean, you can do the two at once. So I love the horror writing that kind of dips its toe into literary. And I don't like it when people say, oh, the horror needs to be elevated, or we're elevating it as if to say that what people are doing isn't good, because it is. It's I like Stephen King stories very much. I love a lot of the Stephen King, and I don't think something has to be branded as literary to be good. But at the same time, there's a lot to learn from people like Hemingway and Jane Austen and when it comes to suspense and plot devices. So I think we can bring those two things together and make stories that have elements of both.
Excellent. That's great parting advice. Let me tell you a quick little story before moving on. And when I'm well enough, I love to kayak.
Oh, I do too.
We would go to Cape May, New Jersey. Of course, we're on the other side of the country from you. You're over in Texas and we're over in Philadelphia. We would drive over to the shore and drive down to Cape May, New Jersey, which is south of Wildwood, something we're looking forward to doing again. And you can kayak in these backwater marshes, and it's all these winding and twisting tunnel-like muddy streams with all these cattails and overgrowth in the mud, and there's no solid ground anywhere, so you can't get to shore. And I went out far early one morning, 6 a.m. I'm kayaking. I'm happy as a clam. I'm moving up as the tide's coming in. And I begin to notice the kayak is taking on water.
Oh, my God.
And, of course, the kayak hadn't been inspected since, 2003, and they were all pretty damaged at that point. And the kayak actually sunk.
No, in the marsh?
In the marshlands, in these streams and I got to a shallow area where I could, if it had been solid ground, I could have stood up. But the moment you put your foot into it, you sink.
Oh.
2 or 3 feet. It would have been, and I couldn't get to the bank. And it was horrifying. Unfortunately, there was cell phone signal, and I had to call the owner and say, I sank. And so he came and got me. And I thought he was going to be mad at me, and he's just trying to get rid of me because most of his kayaks were broken down and people shouldn't have been renting them. But
oh my God.
It was such a horrifying experience for me. We drove over out of Cape May and got a drink somewhere, and I wrote a short story about a woman who had caused all this environmental damage, and she sank in her kayak and made it to this island, and all the animals pecked her to death. It was.
Oh.
In fact, I did the audio version. I forget where I sold it to one of the many anthologies or magazines. I think it was 4 or 5 cents a word. But just talking about your love of maritime horror, it made me think of that story. And
oh yeah, that sounds terrifying.
It was pretty scary, and just of course my friends rag me about it. I'll be like, I'm going out in a kayak today finally, and my friend Bill will go, "Don't sink! You're gonna sink the kayak." Don't. It was terrible. So your husband is also a writer. He writes sci-fi. Russell Lutz. He wrote a book called The Department of the Off-World Affairs, or the Iota Cycle. And now we're going to hopefully do a written interview with him. We'll put up on the website and link it to this page, our website, at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, where you can find, we have a series of interviews going up for Bloodbound Books' Crash Code with the various authors. I had a story in that one. That was a great anthology that combines horror and science fiction about future technology and the way it dehumanizes us. So what's it like being married to another author?
It's been great. And we write very different kinds of books, but his are hard sci-fi. Mm-hmm. So he has a master's in mathematics. I do not. So he'll put actual science in his books. And I think, I'm going to create something and just sort of skip over the science part. So one of the great things about being married to a writer is when I get stuck, when it comes to a plot idea, I can just go to him and say, hey, can I talk to you for a bit? And we just start throwing ideas around. And he's a wonderful sounding board. He really helped me with I got stuck in a couple of plot spots for Fractured Tide. And just talking to him about it, I was able to figure out what I needed to do. So, and it's also, I try to encourage him if he's not writing, or if I'm not writing, we try to encourage each other. Oh, would you, have you written lately? Go write something. So it's been great. Now, we could never co-write a novel, though.
No,
I do not think that would be a good idea.
No. No.
Yeah, we'll skip that part. And he'll read. He definitely will read my stuff. And he likes my stuff, but he's way too easy on me as a critiquer because he's sweet. He doesn't want to hurt my feelings.
And that's true. So, that's very true. Don't trust a family member or friend. That's something Greg Bear was saying. Don't trust anyone who loves you to read your work.
Yeah, parent would be.
Yeah, exactly. But that sounds wonderful. I have friends that sound like they love his work, and hopefully we can get that written interview done and put it up.
That'd be awesome.
This has been great speaking to you. I really appreciate your insights and your wisdom, and I'm sure our audience will.
Well, thank you.
So do you have any future projects coming up you want to talk about?
Sure. I'm working right now on a revision of, it's the third manuscript I wrote, which is, it wrote right before Fractured Tide. And I think as much as I talk about throwing things away, this one I just keep coming back to. And I think it's almost finished. But it's a ghost story. It takes place in Savannah.
Oh.
And yes, and I just love ghost stories. Like the Baker Hotel, which is an hour west of me, fascinates me. And so it's basically this a young woman, a teenager who is being haunted by a parasitic ghost. So it's not that the ghost is haunting her house; it's haunting her. And I'm fascinated by this idea that you just can't. There's no way you can run. It's not like you can just check into a hotel. It comes with you. So I'm working on that. And I also have a book that I've written some sketches for that takes place in a fictional town I've created in South Texas called Gypsum. And it's going to be about a haunted safe, and that's all I really know. I don't know what's in the haunted safe yet. Like I said, when I'm creating things, I start with an image, and they go, okay, where am I going to go with that? So I created the town, I created the safe, and I just need to write it and figure out. I think when they open the safe, something terrible is going to happen, but I don't know what yet.
Excellent. That sounds exciting for you too, and I miss that. I really do. There's a lot of fiction that I have to structure, and I have to plan out, especially short fiction, because you have such a budget of words. But I really miss that adventure sometimes, and I need to get out of the sort of selling my work, marketing mindset, and get back more to creativity. It's been incredible speaking to you, and again, your website will be up at our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. Your website is Leslie Karen Lutz, and you can find her work at Amazon.com. I'm sure the book will be out May 5th. Go get a copy. Go get a printed copy especially. Get a digital copy if you need to. Read on your Kindle. It just sounds like a wonderful book. And leave a review. Always leave a review. You loved it? Definitely leave a review. You hated it? Maybe move on.
I've really, really enjoyed being on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll be back with episode 143, If We Survive, with Phil Thomas. This is episode 142, Haunted Water, with author Leslie Lutz. And this is T. Fox Dunham. Have a spooky June. You loved it? Definitely leave a review. You hated it? Maybe move on. T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife, Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Books. A television series based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality, or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the Stargate anthology Points of Origin from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Fox is an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and he's had published hundreds of short stories and articles. His motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time. Find out more information at www.tfoxdunham.com.
Phil Thomas is an author and screenwriter from the suburbs of Philadelphia. His screenplays have been produced into 2 feature films, False Face and Always from Darkness, and are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon Prime on demand. His screenplay, 3 Tunnels, was a semi-finalist at the LA Screenplay Competition. He is a member of the International Association of Professional Writers and Editors, and he currently writes for Cultured Vultures, Game Skinny, and BloodyDisgusting.com. He formerly held the position of Senior Marketing Manager at Eternal Press, and was a journalist for Patch, where he wrote a daily tech column covering the latest electronics and gadgets. He lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and is currently working on his second novel, Worst Afterlife Ever.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.